Gwen Tennyson versus Adam Eve. I've been seeing this topic floating around and I wanted to wait to make this script until the finale of season 3, but now that that's out I can confidently make a definitive Gwen Tennyson versus Adam Eve video. This will mainly be going over Gwen in the show and tie-in comics along with Eve within the show and comic continuity. So I will be referencing her fight against Conquest in the show along with the later stuff that she manages to pull off in the comics. Firstly, we're going to be talking about Gwen versus Adam Eve base to base, and then we can talk about Anodite Gwen versus Eve without her mental blockage. Also, before you guys go ahead and say I stole this from Danko, if you're not familiar with the situation already, this dude is a notorious plagiarizer who deflects and hides from confrontation. And let's not forget that he's taken from me pretty recently anyway, along with multiple other creators, and he just re-uploaded the same video that he uploaded 6 months ago because he saw Crisis post the same topic. Anywho, educate yourself on the topic by checking the playlist below. Let's not waste any more time now and first break down Adam Eve. Adam Eve, or Samantha, is a superhero who's capable of manipulating matter on a subatomic level. This is what allows her to create constructs of energy along with rearranging matter completely. Theoretically, she could be the strongest person in the series, but she was given a mental blockage for her powers at an early age, allowing her to not affect living matter. However, she can remove this mental blockage when she's under immense stress, allowing her to affect living matter and quite literally burn the skin off of Viltrumites, the strongest race within the universe of Invincible. This is also due to the fact that she can technically increase her stats with her powers at her peak, and she proves herself to be pretty formidable fresh off of waking up from the Invincible War. She can use her powers effectively, it's just that she usually holds back and doesn't resort to doing things like trying to drown her opponent or remove the oxygen from people's lungs. We know as well for Eve, making these constructs takes immense concentration, and even despite being tired, she can create massive weapons that can push back Conquest. Another important thing to note with Eve's powers is that she's effectively nigh unkillable. She can regenerate and reform her body instantaneously while also never technically being able to die from old age either. This girl is certainly busted with just her powers alone, but how strong is she with and without her mental block? Well, we know with her mental block, Eve could still push back Conquest with her constructs and kinda hurt him, but ultimately she's just outmatched by him. Even just surviving this long against Conquest though, this should allow her to surpass the likes of any superhero on Earth such as Immortal and Bulletproof. The Immortal is the same guy capable of drawing blood on Omni-Man while enraged, and she also has shown the ability to fend off against elite Viltrumite guards later on in the series and even kill fodder Viltrumite hybrids. This should put her attack potency baseline at city level, considering Immortal and Bulletproof in the comics can take a meteor that generated this amount of energy. Even if you don't want to apply this to show Eve, this most certainly applies to Eve by the end of the series. And Eve within the show continuity, in my opinion, could probably do very well against some weaker versions of Mark, who baseline I think should at least upscale from his meteor feat, which we know based on the size of the meteor and how casually Mark just threw the meteor away, the amount of kinetic energy Mark would need to produce is enough to destroy mountains. However, Eve cannot really put up this level of power for very long, as her powers take immense concentration and a lot of stamina, and we also see that her durability is definitely not on the level of her attack potency. Unfortunately, because of her powers, she's able to technically hurt characters that are much stronger than herself, but she definitely cannot tank what she can dish out. But when she doesn't have her mental block, her powers reach an entirely new level. She's capable of burning the skin off of Conquest, a Viltrumite who's stronger than Mark and Nolan at this point in the series. Mark, alongside with Thaddeus and Nolan, was capable of destroying planet Viltrum with this level of energy. And this was the same Mark who just barely beat Conquest, who more than likely was holding back. However, this is the most I can say for at least her attack potency, as she doesn't really do anything as impressive as this for the rest of the comic. Regarding her speed, I don't think she's really that impressive either. She's just able to fight Viltrumites and react to Conquest, who at this point should scale to Invincible's faster feats, such as him being faster than the fastest coalition ship, meaning he'd be moving at massively faster than light speeds. However, to say Eve scales to this is a little disingenuous because Eve technically caught Conquest off guard, and Conquest was also not taking the fight seriously the entire time, and it's stated that Eve is just simply not as fast as Mark. So I think at best her speed is probably falling around the massively hypersonic to relativistic range. I think honestly saying Eve is moving at FTL speeds is kind of being generous. The thing is, when Eve's an adult and fights these Viltrumites, we know that these Viltrumites are a lot weaker than the ones that fight in the Viltrumite War, who I think baseline should be light speed, but again, Eve doesn't fight these Viltrumites and she still gets kind of overwhelmed during the war. Regardless though, Adam Eve is definitely a force to be reckoned with, especially if she gets her mental blockage removed. Now, let's see if she has what it takes to take on Gwen Tennyson. Gwen is a human Anodite hybrid, which are beings who can manipulate mana. This is what allows her to create these energy shields and weapons that allow her to combat enemies similar to Eve. But Gwen more so manipulates energy that flows within everything, as mana is, well, in everything. Gwen as well, even before tapping into these powers, was already learning magic, and she was competing and surpassing even the most experienced sorcerers like Charmcaster and Darkstar. Aside from the basic discs and shields, she's mastered her powers to a point where she can restrain enemies, wipe their memories, and even freeze time. She's also shown the ability to absorb energy, resist mind control, and like Eve, even affect things on a molecular level. Although Omniverse tends to retcon things, we are using the Omniverse version of her, since that is the strongest version of the character. We know in that series she was able to loosen the Gateway's ionic bonds as a child, meaning bare minimum her magic would have to affect you on a molecular level. Gwen Tennyson as well has experience in martial arts and is a decently skilled fighter in hand-to-hand combat. But how powerful is she? Well, Gwen throughout her time in the Ben 10 series has pretty much been someone consistently as powerful, if not even stronger than Ben himself. She's usually the middleman and tries to keep the group together and calm, and tries to think of the smartest way possible to get out of a situation. When the time calls for it, she will step up and fight, and she has proven herself to be pretty formidable. However, I know a lot of you are probably going to be pointing out the obvious elephant in the room, and that she is very inconsistent. She can either block grenades that can destroy entire mountains, or struggle with a blowtorch. Which to a degree is true, but the show mainly does this to make Ben not only look good, but also they go out of their way to show that Gwen is also holding back. But when Gwen is actually trying and uses her powers to its limits, she can become someone very scary for even the wielder of the Omnitrix. We've seen Gwen being capable of blocking and holding back punches from Humongosaur, containing aliens like Pandora briefly, and we even see her block attacks from Vilgax. Characters as well that have given Ben trouble in the past, such as Charmcaster and Darkstar, have been defeated by Gwen herself. However, again, she's just very inconsistent when it comes to her base form, and it's whatever the writers pretty much want it to be. But I think in a similar sense to Adam Eve, she can still fight in her base form pretty well. Even while conflicted and not trying to hurt Kevin, she's blocking attacks from him, pushing him back, and even damaging him. This is the same Kevin that no-celled Agrigor, who at his worst is taking bombs that can cover light years. But I think scaling Gwen to Agrigor and Kevin in her base form especially is not really fair, considering base Agrigor beat Gwen and the others in the past. And even after this, she would go on to block a beam from Dagon, an extra dimensional being that far surpasses any threat beforehand. Again, her shield breaks, but it's worth noting that she, like Eve, has chicken nugget feats on stronger characters. We also see her combat Ben with her temporarily blocking a beam from Waybig, and after Gwen drops to the ground, Ben would then return it to base form, and he would say the only reason he won was because she didn't want to fight. Gwen, however, is on an entirely different level when tapping into her Anodite state. In this form's initial appearance, we know that she could have taken down the entire Hybrid Armada. The Hybrid Armada contains dozens of warships that each are capable of destroying planet Galvan, which mind you is bigger than Earth considering it's 6 times bigger than the moon, while our Earth is only 4 times bigger. Gwen in the same form was capable of not only slamming Ultimate Echo Echo, but she was confident that she can solo the ultimates at the same time. We also see in the Dagon arc, Gwen is apparently the strongest person in the room, the same room containing Humongosaur and Dagon amped Vilgax. Gwen would easily fold Ben with minimal effort, and mind you, this is the same Humongosaur who probably scales above the Entropy Pump, considering he was able to at least stagger Agrigor while the Entropy Pump would have done 0 damage to him. Some may point this out as inconsistent, but Agrigor and Dagon are threats to the universe itself anyway, and Gwen in her Anodite form would fall in between these two in pure power. As far as speed goes, even in her base form, Gwen was reacting to Kevin, Ben's aliens, Agrigor, and all of these major villains, which baseline should put her combat and reaction speeds at light speed. With her Anodite form more than likely being massively faster than light to potentially even reaching infinite speeds, considering these guys were threats to an infinite sized universe and they were going to destroy the universe within a finite amount of time. So by proxy, Anodite Gwen could have infinite speed. However, it's clear when going into this versus battle, whatever form we use, Gwen either beats Eve with medium difficulty or she just blinks her away. Base to base, when comparing their feats, Eve is maybe disturbing a planet busting individual with her her mental blockage off, while Gwen is at least able to temporarily stagger or defend against beings who are either already capable of what Conquest can do, or beings who are arguably infinitely stronger than him unironically. Gwen as well should just have the speed advantage here, as Eve doesn't really scale to any of the crazy speed feats within the Invincible series. Meanwhile, Gwen is casually reacting to light in her base form time and time again. She should be faster than Eve, her power should be able to affect Eve to a much more significant degree, and she just has a lot more feats going for her. And again, this is not even me considering her Anodite form, which would just unironically blink her away, and it would be that Dr. Manhattan meme. If Eve somehow releases her mental block, then it's possible she could maybe catch base Gwen off guard, but I honestly don't even see this happening. Realistically, if she did this, I think Gwen would probably evade the blast as she's faster than Eve, or block the blast as her powers could already affect organic matter and her powers are more potent than Eve's, or she could just go Anodite and shoot a blast of her own, which would not only kill Eve but probably destroy the planet itself accidentally. Although these two are very similar in powers and appearance, Gwen is far beyond Eve's capabilities, and Eve only wishes she was as relevant with the times as my goat Lucky Girl. Anywho, with that being said, this is why Gwen vs. Adam Eve isn't fair. And please consider reporting Danko's channel for plagiarism, as we cannot let this guy keep getting away with stealing other people's content. It's not cool, and it's not right.